What happens when the second largest economy in the world becomes a red danger zone to businesses and multinational companies? What happens when two giants of the world economy lock horns? This is not a bedtime video springing lullabies to your ears, but rather an insight on how the big guns wage war against each other without using guns and weapons. Today's video is going to answer a trillion-dollar question. Is the US moving out of China? Let's go. In 2019, President Trump rattled Wall Street when he demanded US firms move production out of China. On August 23, 2019, Trump took to Twitter ordering American companies to immediately start looking for an alternative to China and build more products in the US. In doing so, he cited the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, passed in 1977 to deal with an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States. The president's threat unsettled investors, sending stocks to session lows on a day when the Dow Jones Industrial Average shed more than 600 points. The recent conflict between China and Taiwan has severely strained the relationship between the US and China. As the US-China trade war and dispute over Taiwan rumbles on, and relations between other liberal democracies and Beijing deteriorate due to everything from intellectual property, IP theft, to human rights violation in Xinjiang and the erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy, many global re-owned companies are deserting China. There has been a slight uptick in US companies moving their operations out of China. For most of this year, the intense COVID-19 restrictions in China have been undermining confidence among US businesses operating in the world's second largest economy. Though the pandemic is partially to blame for this, the reality on the ground is far more complicated, mainly due to the US-China tensions that have worsened over the last 4 years. For example, when it comes to emerging market manufacturing know-how, reliability, currency stability, safety, and promising domestic market growth, China is the place to be. A fact that is well known by the world. In fact, no country comes close in developing world to China, and that is mainly why US companies are so headstrong about staying there. But the question remains, how much worse will the trade war get before American firms are forced to source elsewhere? While there are still a significant number of American companies operating in China, many have signaled their intentions of downsizing or shifting away from China for better stability as US-China trade relations worsen. The shift is a response to growing concerns about the geopolitical tensions and pandemic-induced supply chain disruptions that have dominated operations in China in the last few years. For context, China has long been the world's factory floor for high-tech electronics, unrivaled in its ability to secure legions of high-skilled workers and the production capacity to handle demand for the next IT device. However, American companies in China are as worried now about US-China relations as they were when President Trump's trade war peaked in 2019. There may have been a brief Biden bump in sentiment when relations seemed as if they might improve after President Biden's inauguration a year ago, but that too has disappeared. One of the biggest US tech giants in China, Apple Incorporated, has even begun planning to move a very small portion of its latest iPhone production to India instead, in the wake of the recent deterioration in US-China trade relations. Similarly, part of Google's newest Pixel phone production will be done in Vietnam. China is still by far the dominant consumer electronics manufacturer, but it's not just smartphone production that is moving out of the country. But what about American companies that have moved out of China over the last couple of months? Let's take a look at some of them. New York investment bank BlackRock was planning to become a major player in the Chinese market. In August 2020, the world's largest asset managing business garnered approval from the China Securities Regulatory Commission to launch a wholly owned mutual fund arm in Shanghai. In May 2021, the bank also received a license for a majority-owned wealth management venture, which it planned to own in partnership with China Construction Corp and Singapore state investor Temasek Holdings. But on the 14th November 2022, the company announced that it had indefinitely postponed the launch of its exchange-traded fund in China. According to the Financial Times, BlackRock made the U-turn as a result of US-China tensions and the risk of political backlash, as well as the fact that US Treasury bonds currently deliver a higher return than Chinese bonds. With the US-China trade war showing no sign of abating, Stanley Black & Decker is also on the move. The industrial tools and household hardware maker permanently closed its factory in Shenzhen in November 2021 after 25 years of operation. Growing competition and rising labor and land costs were cited as reasons for the closure. Stanley Black & Decker had planned to open its brand new 425,000 square foot, $90 million factory in Fort Worth, Texas by the end of 2020, but it was delayed until 2021. As relations between the US and China worsened and the trade conflict intensified, Dell quietly moved production and supply chains away from the People's Republic. In fact, the Nikkei Asian Review reported in 2019 that the Texas-headquartered tech company was planning to shift up to 30% of its notebook production out of China. That same Nikkei Asian Reviewer report cited anonymous sources stating that Dell competitor HP was also planning to relocate 30% of its notebook production away from China. The reasoning behind both moves was to avoid the punishing US tariffs on tech products produced in the People's Republic for the US market. In 2021, it was also reported that HP has sold its Chinese laser printer production to Taiwanese company Foxconn. Nike suppliers have been relocating production facilities to Southeast Asia and Africa for some time now, and the company reviewed its supply chains in Xinjiang too, following stories of the mistreatment of Muslim Uyghurs in the region. Swathes of Chinese people then boycotted international brands such as Nike, who chose to speak out against what was happening in Xinjiang. Sales of its products in the country have fallen due to this and continued COVID lockdowns. Though Intel remains confident in the Chinese economy and is strongly committed to operating in the country, the Silicon Valley-based semiconductor chipmaker has followed many US companies by shifting the manufacturing and assembly of some of its wares from the People's Republic to Vietnam. Unlike its arch-rival Adidas, which has halved its Chinese manufacturing since 2010, Puma is still feeling the effects of a Chinese consumer boycott. Sparked by statements it made about the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in March 2021, the company, which used to make more than a quarter of its products in the People's Republic, is keen to diversify its manufacturing base and supply chains, not to mention avoid US tariffs. It's now producing more of its running shoes, sportswear, and other products in Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Global accommodation giant Airbnb has stopped all its Chinese listings as continued COVID-19 lockdowns hit the tourism market in the country hard. Reports say the company will maintain an office in China to help Chinese tourists booking elsewhere in the world, but it's given up on a domestic market it entered in 2016. We have come to the end of today's video. Do you think more multinational companies will move out of China soon? Is the US behind these companies pulling out of China? What China do to avert this? Do share your thoughts in the comment section. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tap the bell icon so you can get notifications about any future videos.